Hey everybody, I'm Grandmaster Ben Finegold here with our weekly lecture series. This week's lecture is actually a two-parter. I want to thank our sponsor, Shea Crippen. If you'd like to sponsor a lecture, contact Karen. Her information's on the screen. And this is a two-part lecture. This is part one on the famous female player Vera Menchik, one of the greatest female players of all time, and definitely in her era, the best female player in the world. She was the first and only woman competing in master level tournaments with the world's best players. Before her, women typically played with other women, and after her, women played in open tournaments. And basically, she was the very first famous, very strong woman who unfortunately, her life ended early in World War II. Her home in England was destroyed by a German bomber, and she died at the age of I believe 38. She was 38 years old. And her family was also killed in the air raid, so that was unfortunate. I think her mom and her sister. So anyway, she was born in Russia or Czechoslovakia, depending on what year it was. And then later, at the end of her life, she lived in England. And that's where she played a lot of her tournaments. She was the first woman to beat lots of famous strong male masters. And she won world championship several times, typically in round-robin formats. She was 8-time female world champion. And this lecture, we're going to talk about games that she played in the 1920s. And in part two next week, we're going to talk about games she played in the 1930s and until her death in 1944. There's a picture of her with her sister from 1926. And the Wikipedia article is very long because she was such a fine player. Here's a simultaneous exhibition she was giving in London. And they talk about a lot of her victories and tournaments and matches, a lot of the top players that she met. Success in Maribor. I was in Maribor for the World Youth Championship. I didn't realize that that's where one of her World Championship matches was. And basically, she was way better than the other women, so those World Championships weren't very competitive. She would win a lot of them with perfect scores. If we go down to the bottom of her Wikipedia page, and we'll look at her later years in the second lecture, but I just wanted to get back to her. So these are the Women's World Championship matches she played between 1927 and 1939. She won all of them, and she won 4 of them with a perfect score. 8 out of 8, 14 out of 14, 9 out of 9, 14 out of 14 again. And her worst scores were 10.5 out of 11, 18 out of 19, and 6.5 out of 8. 6.5 out of 8, terrible. And she also won 2 matches against Sonia Graf, who's also a famous female player. When they played the World Championship in 1937, Vera Menchik beat Sonia Graf very easily, 11.5, 4.5. And Wikipedia page is very long because she was such a strong player. There's a stamp from Yugoslavia with her on the stamp. There's her with Max Erva, world chess champion. Menchik beat Erva twice. So that's pretty good. And so forth. Okay, let's have a look at some of the games, because that's what we're here for, is to see her brilliant play. Let's see. Okay, so this is against Frederic Lazard from Paris, 1929. Today's games will be from the 20s, which I mentioned earlier. And the games that I'm going to show next week in the later years will be from the 30s and 40s. Let me flip the board. Okay, I hope I didn't confuse you guys too much. Okay, so Vera Menchik has black. In the current position, black is up 2 pawns. They've opposite side castled. And this position, her opponent played queen takes e5, winning one of the pawns back. And Menchik decided, since she's up a pawn, she'll trade queens and go into a pawn-up endgame with the move queen e4. And this has another idea which her opponent missed. And he blundered in this position. I think in this position, white should probably trade queens. Maybe white can play rook e1, defending the queen on e5. And black's a pawn up in the endgame and has good winning chances. But her opponent blundered playing for tricks, but he didn't realize tricks were for kids because that commercial wouldn't come out for 50 years. So how was he supposed to know that? And he played the tactical move, rook takes f7. And the idea is if we take the queen, rook takes rook leads to checkmate. And if we take the rook, then queen h8 check leads to checkmate. Menchik has 3 ways to block, but they all just stave off mate for a move. And white won the pawn on f7. Now this move is a blunder, so if you're watching on YouTube, you can pause your video now if you'd like and try to find the winning move for black. Rook takes f7 loses the game immediately, actually. Although, I guess white didn't know about resigning because white didn't resign in a position where everybody would resign. Okay, we're back. If you've paused the video to find black's winning move here, black played queen takes h4 check. And unfortunately for white, white's going to have to give away the queen at some point. Then black can play rook takes rook. So first variation, which is quite funny, is king g1. Black has rook d1 checkmate with advantage because we got double check on the king. So king g1's not good. And if you play queen h2 here, we trade queens. I take your rook on f7, and black's up a rook. So white played the third choice, which was bishop takes queen, rook takes check. Now the bishop is uncovered and is defending the g1 square, meaning white has only one legal move, queen h2, and we take, and black's a piece up for nothing, and a pawn. And for some reason, white didn't resign, so the game went on a long time. White resigned here, so okay. I don't know why white didn't resign before and resigned here. But going back to the really nice combination, rook takes f7 is a really big blunder because of queen takes h4 check, which I'm sure Menchik saw when she played queen e4, that white didn't have the opportunity to play rook takes f7, which he did anyway. So brilliant tactics from Menchik. Okay, next game, Menchik is also black. This was played in Hastings 27-28. It's always played over the New Year against Abraham Baratz. So let's have a look. b3. Menchik plays very solid, positional chess. h3 and g4, not so good. Menchik already, I think, has the advantage with the black pieces. Better center. Knight f1 to g3 is very enterprising. And then knight takes g4, a brilliant tactic. So in this position, the knight is defended by the f-pawn. The e-pawn is defended by the f-pawn. So the f-pawn is overworked. Bishop on b2 isn't defended. So after knight takes g4, a brilliant move by Menchik, if white plays bishop takes g7, we have knight takes e3. And now you're either going to lose your queen, your bishop would check, or your knight on g3. And black's going to be up 2 pawns in the resulting position. Check, takes, and black's up 2 pawns. And queen e2 is no better. We take, and knight f4 is winning. King takes g7 is winning. Black's just up material. So after knight takes g4, which white overlooked, and that's why knight takes g4 wasn't a threat in this position. It's only a threat because the knight's on g3, and the queen is hitting the knight. So otherwise, black couldn't play this. But now black has the knight takes e3 idea with the pawn overworked. So white just took the knight on g4. Menchik took the bishop. Now black is a pawn up. Black has the 2 bishops. Black's threatening the rook, and black's threatening the g-pawn. So black has an initiative and extra material. Rook b1, check. Knight d2, defending the g-pawn, sort of accidentally. Knight e5, attacking the g-pawn again. Bishop f3. Queen a5. Now black has all kinds of threats. Knight f1, defending. Menchik takes a second pawn. The queen can easily get out, and we can never play rook a1. The queen can just come back to a5. So Menchik's like 2 pawns out is better than 1 pawn up. Bishop e2, queen back to a5, f4, and black's up 2 pawns with the 2 bishops. But the game got really interesting later because of what Menchik did. Knight e4, takes, check. Bishop g7, knight takes e3. Now Menchik played a brilliant move. Not bishop e8, the next move. Queen f1, h6. h6, brilliant move, has a threat, which white didn't see. White played c3, controlling the d4 square. And this actually reminds me of a famous Fischer game from my 60 memorable games. And I wonder if Fischer was familiar with this game, since his move is very similar to the winning move that Menchik played. So black to play and win more material. You can pause your video if you want to think about it a little bit. Okay, so Menchik said, "You will know my name is the Lord." Queen takes f4 check, the point of h6. And idea is very simple. The king doesn't have the g5 square available. So after king takes queen, bishop e5 is checkmate. If Menchik hadn't played h6, then white's king could go to g5. So the king went back to f2, knight e5, threatening the bishop, threatening the d3 pawn, and white's position collapses. White's already down 3 pawns, and it looks like he's going to lose more. So here, Baratz resigned, and Menchik won the game. Really nice tactical play. She won a pawn on the king's side, she won a pawn on the queen's side, and then she won the f pawn, which is king side and center. And white was basically just torn apart. To pieces, you say? Yeah. Okay. Flip the board. Okay, Vera Menchik's white against Edgar Colle. Edgar Colle's famous player, inventor of the Colle opening. This game was played in Paris in 1929. Again, all of the games we're going to look at today are from the 20s. These are the early years of Vera Menchik, when she was in her 20s. And she has the white pieces in this position. Black's up a pawn, but black's e-pawn is weak, and king is exposed, and so forth. Mainly and so forth. Colle played king h5, very risky. Rook takes e6. And again, just like in one of the previous games, one of Menchik's opponents tried to out-tactic her. And in this position, white's threatening queen takes f5, which is winning. So black's position is already quite bad. But he played a really nice trick, which doesn't work. Rook takes g2. And the idea is black takes a pawn, so that's good. Black's threatening rook g1 mate, so that's good. And if white takes the rook, then Colle wins with queen a1 check. And now black would be Colle and white would be melancholy because white's getting checkmated on the back rank. Again, you can stave off mate by giving your pieces away, but after bishop f1, queen takes f1 is going to be mate. Okay, so Menchik didn't fall for that. She didn't take the rook. She played queen takes f5 check. Now, if you play rook g5, queen h3 is checkmate. And if you play queen g5, white has several ways to win. I guess the easiest is queen h7 check and then mate. There's other ways to mate also. So Colle played king h4. Menchik, already in 1929, knew my favorite idea, always repeat and always retreat. Because she played queen f4 check. And Colle doesn't want to play king h3 because rook h6 check leads to mate very quickly. As does queen h6 check. Even just trading queens leads to mate. Okay, so he played king h5. Menchik repeated. Menchik didn't repeat. She just played rook e5 check. I thought she repeated when I looked at the game earlier. I'm always in favor of repeating, so. Okay, then rook g5 was played. If you play king g6, white at least has mate in 2. Maybe white has better. But Colle played rook g5. And here Menchik did another tactic which forced resignation. Pause your video if you want to try to look for it. So white's a play and win with a beautiful tactic. Okay, we're back. And hopefully, for those of you who paused your video, you found the winning tactic played by Vera Menchik, which was queen g4 check. Everybody's pinned, but black's more pinned. So if you play king g6, everything wins. This wins a rook and a queen and mates. And if you play king h6, this also wins everything. Queen h4 check, and then queen h5 is mate. And king g6 is even worse. Although I guess this is a quicker mate. But okay, everything wins. So after queen g4 check, black was forced to resign since king g6, king h6 only legal moves, and they lead to checkmate. So really nice tactics from Menchik, completely refuting Colle's rook takes g2. Nice try, but not nice enough. Okay, go on to the next game. Okay, now the best player in England, female-wise, who wasn't Vera Menchik, was Edith Price. And Edith Price and Vera Menchik would play in like the British Women's Championship and the Women's World Championship. And Vera Menchik almost always won. She was a better player than Price. And in this game, Menchik proved she was the better player and her opponent had to pay the price. What's that? That's not funny? That is funny. Yeah. Okay, Vera Menchik's white. They played some kind of King's Indian. Pretty modern for 1927. I've had white and black in this position, mainly black. Here I play bishop f5, although I don't have good results, but I play it. Rook e8, that's not as good. h3, bishop e6, attacking c4 pawn, d5, takes, bishop d7. Black's pretty passive. Bishop e3, that's the point of h3, White can develop the bishop and not get harassed by knight g4. So h3 was a good move. Knight a6. Queen d2. Both sides completing development, but black is pretty passive. Knight c7. Black wants to play b5. Get some space. Put pressure on the d5 pawn. Rook d1, taking the pressure off. Knight b5. Certainly not a move I would have played, but maybe it's okay. Takes. Rook c1. Yeah, and black is just, because of the pawn on d5, black doesn't have a lot to do. White has more space in the center, and white's pieces are just better placed. Rook on e8's not very good. Bishop on g7 doesn't have a lot to do. Bishop on b5 just sitting out there. Knight d4 is going to hit him later. So white's slightly to clearly better here. Okay, a6. Knight d4. Bishop goes back. Queen b4. Attacking b7. Rook b8. King h2. Not doing very much, but it's not easy for black to do anything. So white defends her h-pawn more. It's attacked once and defended once. Now it's defended twice. It's just hard for black to do anything. Black played bishop c8. Doesn't make a lot of sense. I guess black wanted to play knight d7. Queen c3. White's going to infiltrate on the c-file, which she did. Black is just very passive. Knight c5, trapping the white rook on c7. Well, it did trap the rook, then b4. Knight a4. Doubling rooks on the c-file. And black just doesn't have a lot of counterplay here. There's one open file, and white dominates the file. And then the most advanced pawns in the position are white's pawns on the 4th and 5th rank. White's knight on d4 is dominating the dojo. So just black's position is just very, very sad. King f8. Not much for black to do. Bishop e4. White decided she wants to play bishop c2 and kick the knight out, which she did. You can't play bishop d7 because at the very least I could take and then take the knight. And white has 2 pieces for a rook. So she's forced to either play b5 or knight b6. She played knight b6, attacking the d-pawn. Menchik plays bishop b3. Now white wants to play a4, a5. Black is just too passive here. Now you can see why Menchik played king h2 especially, because when she moved her bishop over here, she defended her h-pawn. So that was pretty good thinking. Rook d7. Menchik wants to keep pieces on. Typically, when you have more space, you want all the pieces on. And when you have no space, you want all the pieces off. So black was, with no space, is trying to trade pieces. Menchik says, no, I'm going to keep the pieces on the board because your pieces are blocking your other pieces. It's too jumbled up there. Rook back to d8. And knight e6 check with a discovered attack on the knight. Nice tactic. Bishop takes. If you play f takes, I take the knight attacking your rook, and then I take on e6, and white wins a pawn, and black can't move. So she takes with the bishop, Price does. Bishop takes. Now it looks like black's losing material because these are hanging. And the reason it looks like that is because black's losing material. Price tried bishop f5, attacking the rook, hoping the rook moves away, and then black can move her rook away. They trade rooks. And now Menchik plays a Zwischenzug. Notice black's threatening rook takes bishop and bishop takes bishop. Material's equal. But Menchik plays bishop c7, and that just wins the game because the bishop is hanging and the rook is hanging on b8. Price tried rook c8. I guess the best move is to take on b3 And now, unfortunately, well, when I say the best move, unfortunately, black doesn't have time to take either one of these pawns because rook c8 is mate. So it looks like black has to play bishop a4, and then after check, bishop e8. But this is obviously winning for white. White's up in exchange, and black can't move anything. So she played rook c8, rook takes c2, and black resigned. Black's down a piece. So that was a real nice positional, strategical domination from Menchik over her opponent, Price. This was in the FIDE Women's World Championship in 1927. And every world championship Menchik played in, she won. And this one was no exception. And you could see she's basically outclassing the opposition. The truth hurts. Okay, let me flip the board since Menchik had the black pieces. This is against Stephen Smith, unlike the Smith she just played. This was played in England in 1928 in one of the big tournaments. Stephen Francis Smith has white. Menchik played the French defense. What's funny about this game, and one of the reasons I'm showing you, is in this position, if you remember the Ding Gukesh match, which finished a month or two ago, this is what Gukesh played against Ding, knight e2. So Gukesh must have been studying his Vera Menchik games. Okay, Menchik played c5, c3, knight c6, f4, queen b6. This is not looking like the Ding Gukesh games anymore. Knight f3, always play f6. What's that? It's not always play f6? That was close. So black is putting tremendous pressure on white's center. Sometimes in these positions, black sacrifices a piece to keep the white king at bay. g3. White has the V formation for victory. CD, CD, FE, FE, and bishop b4 check, knight c3. A lot of times in these positions, white plays king f2, king g2. In this particular position, I think king f2 just runs into knight takes e5, and there's a pin on the d pawn. So I think that's why white has to play knight c3, castles. A lot of times, black wants to sack the exchange and take all these center pawns. White plays bishop f4. I guess black's not going to sack the exchange on f3 because white didn't allow it. Bishop back to e7, putting pressure on the b pawn and preparing to play g5 later. Rook b1, passive way to defend. And Menchik played g5. Very tactical move, and it's knight is defending the d4 pawn, and the knight's attacking the g5 pawn. So black isn't really sacrificing much, because if you take on g5, I can take on d4. White did take on g5. Knight takes e5, a brilliant tactical move from Menchik. And the idea is, if you take on e5, and I take, and you take, black has a really good move here that you will approve of. You may have disapproved of most of this lecture. You might be going boo, boo at home. You know, what do I know? But queen f2 mate with advantage. And black wins immediately. Okay, so knight takes e5 just tries to get rid of white's d pawn, so we can play queen f2 mate later. And black is obviously threatening knight takes knight check, winning everything. So white played knight takes, bishop takes, materials equal now, but black has two threats, threatening the d pawn and also threatening knight takes e5, d takes e5, queen f2 mate again. Knight takes c6, B takes c6. Black has the two bishops and the vatals. Black's king is safer because white's king is on e1 and white can't castle. Queen g4, threatening the bishop. Menchik defends her bishop. And Stephen Smith says, haha, h4. And I'm attacking your bishop and it's pinned. So white pinned all of his hopes on this move, which were quickly dashed by Menchik. Okay, so what should black play in this position? It's not a hard move to find, but you can notice the queen on g4 and the bishop on c8 are lined up. So black plays e5, attacking the queen. When the queen moves away, my bishop's not pinned anymore to my king. So queen back to e2, takes on d4, takes on g5, bishop f5, defending the black king, threatening rook e8, and threatening the rook, and threatening the knight. And bishop f5 is the star move of the game because by threatening rook e8, winning the queen, and the rook, and the knight, and we're defending our king, which is very important. So white doesn't get an attack down the h-file. Okay, first things first, white has to stop rook e8 because that's, can't lose your queen. So he played queen h5. Menchik took the knight. Oh, give me the knight. And this position, black's up a pawn, and both sides are getting checkmated. Unfortunately for Menchik's opponent, he's getting checkmated first. Queen takes h6. Here comes back rank check. Queen e3 check. If you play king d1, c2 not only wins the rook, but it's mate. It's even better than winning the rook, I guess. So bishop e2 is forced. Queen d2 check. The king has to walk into attack on the f-file. Bishop takes rook check. Discovered check. King g1. And now this is really nice. If you play queen takes bishop, then white gets some attack going with queen check and such. Although black can just check on e1 first and then take the bishop with check. White loses all of their pieces with check. And the worst part is, in this position, white's not even threatening anything now because the rook is blocked by the king. So all these checks don't work. We have a bishop here, king here. So if it was white to move, white's still losing. White doesn't have any threats. But it's black to move, which is even worse. Bishop f5 check. If white plays g4, then everything wins. Bishop g4 wins, queen g4 wins. But white decided that it's enough misery already, and he played king h4, and then queen g4 mate. Probably resigning made more sense, but it's nice to end the game in checkmate. So that was a pretty nice game for Menchik. All of those games were nice. Menchik was a lot better than the other female players of the time, and that's why a lot of her most famous wins are against male players. She was the only woman playing in these tournaments, and she would score very well, and she was by far the best female player in the world. And this lecture, we concentrated on her games played in the 1920s. The lecture next week, the later years, this one's the earlier years, we'll talk about games she played in the 30s and 40s before her untimely death in 1944. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that lecture on Vera Menchik, or the early years. Please like and subscribe and leave a comment. It helps out the channel tremendously. And make sure you contact Karen if you want to sponsor a lecture. Once again, Shay Crippen, I want to thank you for sponsoring this lecture and next week's lecture, part 2, the later years. And I'll see you guys next time with more weekly lectures. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye.